Herr Bundeskanzler, I would like to give the word for you for your initial speech. Thank you.
Sehr geehrter Herr Ministerpräsident Støre, lieber Jonas, sehr geehrte Frau Dr. Proll, lieber Wolfgang Hellmich, meine Damen und Herren. Russlands Überfall auf die Ukraine Ende Februar hat unser Sicherheitsumfeld dramatisch verändert. Die Fundamente unserer Sicherheit sind weiter solide, die transatlantische Freundschaft und die enge Kooperation in der Europäischen Union. Die europäische Sicherheitsordnung der vergangenen Jahrzehnte aber hat Russland mit seinem völkerrechtswidrigen imperialen Angriffskrieg zertrümmert. Für uns alle in Europa bedeutet das große Anpassung. Anpassung, die nicht auf die klassische Sicherheits- und Verteidigungspolitik beschränkt bleiben. Zu diesen Anpassungen gehört unsere Entscheidung, erstmalig in großem Umfang und eng abgestimmt mit unseren Verbündeten Waffen in ein Kriegsgebiet wie eben jetzt die Ukraine zu liefern. Ich weiß, lieber Jonas, ihr habt eine ganz ähnliche Wende vollzogen, andere unserer Freunde und Verbündeten ebenso. Das bestärkt uns in unserem Kurs. In einem Kurs, den ich vor dem Hintergrund des russischen Angriffskrieges weiterhin uneingeschränkt für richtig halte. Es geht darum, die Ukraine in der Wahrung ihres legitimen Rechts auf Selbstverteidigung zu unterstützen, die europäische Sicherheitsarchitektur zu schützen und Putins Neoimperialismus Einhalt zu gebieten. Und damit haben wir durchaus Erfolg. Russland, davon bin ich überzeugt, kann und wird diesen Krieg auf dem Schlachtfeld nicht mehr gewinnen. Die erbarmungslosen Angriffe auf lebenswichtige Infrastruktur, auf Wasser- und Energieleitungen, auf ukrainische Städte und Dörfer, sie sind eine furchtbare und zugleich verzweifelte Strategie verbrannter Erde. Verzweifelt auch deshalb, weil wir Russland damit nicht durchkommen lassen. Unsere Solidarität mit der angegriffenen Ukraine bleibt ungebrochen und das, obwohl der Krieg auch bei uns erhebliche Auswirkungen hat. Russland muss begreifen, wir werden die Ukraine weiter unterstützen, for as long as it takes, wirtschaftlich, finanziell, humanitär, durch den Wiederaufbau zerstörter Energieinfrastruktur, jetzt aktuell und auch mit Waffen. Artillerie und Luftverteidigung sind das, was derzeit in den Kämpfen im Osten und Südosten des Landes und zur Verteidigung ukrainischer Städte besonders gebraucht wird. Artillerie und Luftverteidigung liefern wir und wir schauen kontinuierlich, wo wir noch mehr tun können, aktuell vor allem bei der Luftverteidigung. Parallel dazu bilden wir im Rahmen einer neuen EU-Ausbildungsmission allein in Deutschland eine ukrainische Brigade mit bis zu 5.000 Soldatinnen und Soldaten aus. Und natürlich, lieber Jonas, freuen wir uns auch über die norwegische Unterstützung dieser EU-Mission. Aus der russischen Aggression gegen die Ukraine haben wir Lehren für den Schutz unseres eigenen Landes und unserer Verbündeten gezogen. Bei der Bundeswehrtagung im September habe ich der Führung der Bundeswehr gesagt, der Kernauftrag unserer Streitkräfte ist die Landes- und Bündnisverteidigung, die Verteidigung der Freiheit in Europa. Alle anderen Aufgaben unserer Streitkräfte leiten sich daraus ab. Alle anderen Aufgaben ordnen sich diesem zentralen Auftrag unter. Und dabei halten wir es mit dem Satz Fridtjof Nansens, den seinerzeit schon Willy Brandt in seiner berühmten Rede bei der Annahme des Friedensnobelpreises in Oslo zitiert hat. Skjønt dere å handle før det for sent å angre. Für alle Deutschen und alle Norweger, die mein Norwegisch jetzt nicht auf Anhieb verstanden haben. Dieser Satz lautet: Beeilt euch zu handeln, ehe es zu spät ist, zu bereuen. Kein Aggressor darf jemals daran zweifeln, dass wir fest entschlossen sind, jeden Alliierten und jeden Zentimeter des Bündnisgebiets mit allen uns zur Verfügung stehenden Kräften zu verteidigen. Hierfür halten wir in diesem und den kommenden 2 Jahren bis zu 17.000 Soldaten für die NATO Response Force vor. 2023 übernehmen wir zudem erneut die Führung der schnellen Eingreifgruppe der NATO. Es ist gut, Norwegen und die Niederlande dabei fest an unserer Seite zu wissen. Wir sind mit Kräften des Heeres und der Luftwaffe in der Slowakei präsent. Die Luftwaffe sichert den Luftraum über Estland und unsere Marine hat ihre Präsenz in der Ostsee erhöht. Und wir haben unseren NATO-Gefechtsverband in Litauen dauerhaft verstärkt. Auf ihrem Gipfel von Madrid hat die NATO sich mit ihrem neuen strategischen Konzept ebenfalls klar zur kollektiven Verteidigung als Kernauftrag bekannt. Diese Beschlüsse setzen wir mit aller Kraft um. Eine Brigade der Bundeswehr teilen wir für die Verteidigung Litauens ein und stärken so auch die Verteidigung des Baltikums insgesamt. Letzten Monat haben erste Kräfte dieser Brigade bereits ihre Verlegung nach Litauen erprobt und dort mit unseren litauischen Verbündeten geübt. Für die NATO-Streitkräftestruktur haben wir der Allianz zudem eine gepanzerte Division sowie umfassende Luft- und Seestreitkräfte zugesagt, die künftig in hoher Einsatzbereitschaft für die Verteidigung des Bündnisgebietes herangezogen werden können. Und wir arbeiten daran, die militärischen Fähigkeiten der Europäischen Union zu verbessern, etwa was ihre militärischen und zivilen Führungsfähigkeiten und Strukturen angeht oder die Entwicklung eigener Fähigkeit komplementär zur NATO. Das gilt zum Beispiel für die Luftverteidigung. Vor 3 Monaten habe ich in Prag den Aufbau eines europäischen Raketenabwehrschirms vorgeschlagen, als europäischen Beitrag in der NATO und kompatibel mit den Strukturen der Allianz. 14 Partner haben sich dieser Initiative inzwischen angeschlossen und ich bin froh und dankbar, lieber Jonas, dass auch Norwegen darunter ist. Meine Damen und Herren, auch die verantwortungslose Nuklearrhetorik des russischen Regimes nehmen wir sehr ernst. Wir lassen uns davon aber auch nicht einschüchtern. Stattdessen setzen wir alles daran, dass die rote Linie hält, wonach ein nuklear ausgetragener Krieg niemals Realität werden darf. Darüber war ich mir auch mit dem chinesischen Präsidenten Xi Jinping einig, als ich Anfang des Monats in Peking zu Besuch war. Und ich bin erleichtert, dass es uns gelungen ist, diesen fundamentalen Grundsatz auch im Abschlussdokument des G20-Gipfels zu verankern. Solange Staaten wie Russland Nuklearwaffen als Teil ihres Bedrohungspotenzials besitzen, braucht natürlich die NATO ein glaubwürdiges Abschreckungspotenzial. Alles andere hieße, uns erpressbar zu machen. Deswegen haben wir entschieden, in den kommenden Jahren F-35 Kampfjets zu beschaffen und so auch in Zukunft weiterhin einen deutschen Beitrag zur nuklearen Teilhabe der Allianz zu leisten. Das ist ein Gebot nationaler, europäischer und transatlantischer Sicherheit und ein Beitrag zur Lastenteilung im Bündnis. Um unsere Sicherheit und die unserer Alliierten geht es auch bei der Umsetzung des Sondervermögens für die Bundeswehr von 100 Milliarden Euro. Wir sprechen hier über die größte Investition in unsere Streitkräfte seit ihrem Bestehen. Die ersten Lieferverträge wollen wir noch in diesem Jahr schließen, über den Kauf der schon erwähnten F-35, über die Nachrüstung von Schützenpanzern Puma und die Beschaffung von Überschneefahrzeugen. Wie und wo man die gebrauchen kann, erleben unsere Gebirgsjäger bei ihren regelmäßigen Übungen im norwegischen Winter unter arktischen Bedingungen. Und auch 1200 deutsche und norwegische Soldatinnen und Soldaten von Heer, Luftwaffe und Marine haben das gerade in Nord-Norwegen erlebt, wo sie gemeinsam taktische Feuerunterstützung trainiert haben. Eine Übung, die in dieser Form bislang einzigartig ist zwischen unseren beiden Ländern, aber das soll nicht so bleiben. Hier wird schon deutlich, es geht bei der Zeitenwende und ihren Auswirkungen für die Bundeswehr um viel mehr als nur um ziemlich viel Geld. Von der Beschaffung bis zur Ausrüstung, von der Strategie bis in die Einsätze brauchen wir mehr Entscheidungsfreude, mehr Risikobereitschaft und effiziente Strukturen. Und wir brauchen eine europäische Verteidigungsindustrie, die den Ansprüchen moderner Streitkräfte gerecht wird. Dabei kommen wir voran. Mit Frankreich und Spanien haben wir erst vor wenigen Tagen einen Durchbruch beim europäischen Luftkampfsystem FCAS erzielt, ein Projekt, das zentral ist für die Sicherheit und Souveränität Europas. In enger Abstimmung mit der Industrie gehen wir hier noch in diesem Jahr in die nächste Projektphase, in der nun ein Technologiedemonstrator gebaut wird. Jenseits solcher ganz konkreter Fortschritte braucht Deutschland auch eine strategische, um nicht zu sagen mentale Zeitenwende. Dafür arbeiten wir intensiv an der nationalen Sicherheitsstrategie. Diese Sicherheitsstrategie wird einem breiten Spektrum an Bedrohungen und Herausforderungen und einer dauerhaft veränderten globalen Lage Rechnung tragen. Damit das gelingt, werden wir das Handeln aller staatlichen Ebenen enger miteinander verschränken, die Widerstandskräfte von Wirtschaft und Gesellschaft stärken und Instrumente der Krisenbewältigung, Vorsorge und Nachsorge stärker aufeinander abstimmen. Das Leitbild heißt, kurz gesagt, integrierte Sicherheit. Im Kern unserer Sicherheitspolitik steht natürlich der Schutz unseres Landes und des Lebens und der Freiheit der Menschen in Deutschland vor militärischer Aggression. Deshalb werden wir in unserer Sicherheitsstrategie zu einer umfassenden Stärkung unserer Verteidigungsfähigkeit und ohne Wenn und Aber zur Beistandspflicht unter Alliierten bekennen. Wir wissen, wer unsere Freunde und Partner in der Welt sind, und Norwegen ist einer der engsten davon. Und zugleich werden wir dem zunehmenden Risiko einer neuen Blockbildung in der Welt aktiv entgegenwirken. Die Sicherheit und der Wohlstand unseres Landes beruht auf einer internationalen Ordnung, die Macht an Recht bindet, so wie es die Charta der Vereinten Nationen mit ihren Prinzipien tut. Um diese Prinzipien aber in einer multipolaren Welt zu erhalten, müssen wir mit all den Ländern zusammenarbeiten, die bereit sind, für diese Ordnung einzutreten und sie weiterzuentwickeln. Wir werden unsere Beziehungen in der Welt daher immer zunächst auf Partnerschaft und Kooperation ausrichten. Wer die regelbasierte internationale Ordnung aber stört oder sie zerstören will, so wie Putins Russland, der muss mit Deutschlands Widerstand rechnen. Eine weitere zentrale Aufgabe ist eine umfassende Stärkung der Widerstandsfähigkeit im Innern unseres Landes. Wir müssen uns vor Cyberangriffen genauso schützen wie vor Desinformation und hybrider Einflussnahme auf unsere demokratischen Institutionen und Prozesse. Versuche, unsere offene und vielfältige Gesellschaft und unseren sozialen Zusammenhalt zu untergraben, werden wir entschlossen abwehren. Die Sabotageakte gegen die Nord Stream Pipelines und der Angriff auf das Kommunikationsnetzwerk der Deutschen Bahn haben uns gezeigt, wie anfällig auch unsere kritische Infrastruktur ist. Und ich bin sehr dankbar, dass Norwegen und Deutschland vor allem durch unsere Marinen in dieser Frage sehr eng zusammenarbeiten. Und schließlich, auch das gehört unbedingt hierher, werden wir unsere global vernetzte Volkswirtschaft vor einseitigen Rohstoff-, Technologie- und Energieabhängigkeiten schützen. Aber nicht durch ein einseitiges Decoupling von einzelnen Staaten oder Regionen, sondern durch eine kluge, entschlossene Diversifizierung unserer Lieferketten. Die Sicherung einer zuverlässigen und bezahlbaren Energie- und Rohstoffversorgung bleibt eine zentrale Zukunftsaufgabe für unser Land. Dabei legen wir den Schwerpunkt auf den Schutz unserer natürlichen Lebensgrundlagen. Denn Klima, Biodiversität und natürliche Ressourcen haben unmittelbare Auswirkungen auf Sicherheit und Stabilität. Und auch hier ist uns Norwegen Vorbild und Partner zugleich. Wir haben gerade intensiv über eine klimaneutrale Energie- und Industriepartnerschaft zwischen unseren beiden Ländern gesprochen. Schon heute ist Norwegen mit über 40% unserer Erdgasimporte mit Abstand Deutschlands wichtigster Energielieferant. Lieber Jonas, als Russland seine Lieferung erst gekürzt und dann vollständig abgedreht hat, habt ihr eure Lieferung an uns um fast 10% erhöht. Das werden wir bestimmt nicht vergessen. Und wenn ich in diesen Tagen häufiger den Satz sage, Deutschland kommt wohl sicher durch diesen Winter, dann geht mein Dank auch nordwärts. Doch das Potenzial unserer Partnerschaft geht weit über Gaslieferungen hinaus. Ich denke an eine Zusammenarbeit bei erneuerbaren Energien, bei Wasserstoff, aber auch bei klimafreundlichen Technologien wie der Abscheidung und Speicherung von CO2-Emissionen, wo Norwegen weltweit führend ist. Sehr geehrter Herr Ministerpräsident, lieber Jonas, es gibt eigentlich kaum ein Feld, wo Deutschland und Norwegen nicht zusammenarbeiten, wo wir nicht in die gleiche Richtung blicken und gemeinsam vorangehen. Ich weiß, auch ihr weiter im Norden vollzieht gerade die Konsequenzen der Zeitenwende. Der Beitritt unserer schwedischen und finnischen Freunde zur NATO ist Ausdruck davon. Aber genauso das sicherheitspolitische Umsteuern deines Landes. Wir sitzen dabei im selben Boot. Ich glaube, das haben wir alle gespürt, als wir bei meinem Besuch in Norwegen im August mit den anderen nordischen Regierungschefinnen und Regierungschefs zusammengetroffen waren und danach bei echt hanseatischem Wetter über den Oslofjord geschippert sind. Doch über die norwegische Sicht auf die Zeitenwende wirst du uns gleich sicher noch mehr berichten und dem will ich auch nicht vorgreifen. Nur dies noch. Lieber Jonas, herzlichen Dank für deinen Besuch hier bei uns und danke für Norwegens Freundschaft in dieser bewegten Zeit.
Sehr geehrter Herr Bundeskanzler, thank you very much indeed for your deep insights into the core and course of action of NATO and EU policy and your German view and the relations to Norway. I would like to introduce the Prime Minister very swiftly. Jonas Gahr Støre was appointed as Prime Minister of Norway in October 2021. Mr. Støre became leader of the Norwegian Labour Party in 2014. Previously, Mr. Støre served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Jens Stoltenberg's second government from 2005 to 2012, and then he was Minister of Health and Care Services until the change of government in 2013. Before that, he was State Secretary and Chief of Staff at the Office of the Prime Minister from 2000 to 2001. He's also been a member of the Norwegian Parliament and held a number of other senior positions in the civil service and humanitarian organizations. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, you have the word, you have the screen.
Thank you so much, vielen Dank. Thank you for welcoming Norway here in Berlin, bestowing upon us the privilege of being co-sponsor of this conference. Thank you, Olaf, for your kind words. Let me reiterate, as Prime Minister of Norway, Germany is Norway's most important partner in Europe. Coming to Berlin in these pre-Christmas times reminds me that many of my compatriots travel to your country, enjoy cooperation, and really feel a strong bond with Germany, be it business, be it culture, or be it football. We are all cheering. And on a personal note, I would like to thank you, Olaf, Chancellor, for being a solid, principled, and reliable partner, ally, and friend. It is in times like this that you really can test what these qualities consist of. And I am more secure in my position as Prime Minister of Norway, knowing that you are at the helm of Germany with those values so well established. So thank you for being you, Olaf, and thank you for being such a good friend. Now, I reflect on this. We have had some similar paths. You and I last fall fought utterly democratic elections, and we won. It's hard to think about that 1 year after. But those were times that winning elections in democracies was not a simple thing. Even counting votes became an issue. And I think we can be proud that we came to power through regular elections. We both lead coalitions with the immense pleasure that entails. And on our watch, we have been confronted with unprecedented challenges, a full-fledged attack war in Europe, the brutal face of Putin's Russia. Russia is our neighbor. We have been at peace with Russia for 1,000 years, but when you wake up and that neighbor is waging full-fledged war on another neighbor, reality is actually changed forever. With it comes a deep energy crisis hitting Europe's economy, household and industry. There is inflation and there is instability. Truly, it's time for a Zeitenwende, and we all have to be part of that. Here in Berlin, we see the true challenge that lies ahead of us and what it will demand from all of us as leaders, as democracies, as partners and allies. You quoted Fridtjof Nansen, Olaf. He got the Nobel Peace Prize 100 years ago, and he had many good quotes. And the quote I sometimes use is the following: "Compassion is realpolitik." And right now, there is a country which is being destroyed in front of our eyes, and millions of people being pushed out as refugees. The worst crisis we have seen in decades. Thousands are coming to my country, and I am informing municipalities around Norway that there is no reason we should not expect that the same thing will go on into next year. We have to be prepared. We have to receive them with the compassion necessary, and we will. So these will be my reflections on the theme today, what the drama in Ukraine means on two critical issues, security and energy. And the two are so much related. But let me just reiterate, as you did, I want to say it at every occasion. Russia must stop this war. And I think it has been well put. If Russia stops the war stops. If Ukraine stops the war, Ukraine disappears. And we cannot let that happen. And that's why this is critically important for Ukraine, but it is a critical value issue for every free nation in Europe. And Norway is aware of that, and we will face that challenge alongside Germany. Right now, Russia is losing the ground war, and it is hitting back by terrorizing from the air. We need to help Ukraine in that situation, and I'm happy that Norway has been able recently now, together with partners, to fund purchase of gas so that Ukraine can store for the coming winter. We are doing that under the auspices of the EBRD, the European Bank for Development and Reconstruction, and together with partners we are giving what I would say is a modest contribution so that they will have some more security. On security, dear friends, a few dimensions I will reflect with you. After the 24th of February, Norway, for the first time since the 50s, went away from a principle which consisted of saying that we don't export weapons to a country at war. This was more a guideline for commercial activity. But what happened in Ukraine was far beyond commercial activity. You and I had close contact in those days because this was also a change for Germany. And again, I think we should be happy that Olaf, you are at the helm, aware of what history means and how we do things when it comes to the support militarily to another country. Ukraine has the right to defend itself, and we have the right to support Ukraine in defending itself. And that's why we have given a broad range of donations in the military sense, including heavy artillery, missiles, and sophisticated weapons. We have supported with training, and we have supported with humanitarian and economic support so that the state, under the circumstances, can run. Yesterday, I presented the budget for 2023. And I will share with you today that when we come into 2023, Norway will make a major pledge, multi-year, for Ukraine, to support Ukraine. It is right that Norway is in the favorable position of being an energy exporter at the moment. And that is why it gives us an extra incentive of leading in the way we assist Ukraine in coming through not only this first year, but the coming 4 or 5 years. And the package we will propose to Parliament is consisting of support to Ukraine substantially, but there will also be an element of supporting those countries beyond Ukraine, which are now being hit by food shortage, food prices, and energy prices. So coming into 2023, we will present this initiative, and we hope that will also stimulate other countries to follow suit. Through extraordinary parliament decisions, we strengthened our defense in the spring. We are sailing more, flying more, observing more in the north. We are neighbor to Russia's strategic arsenal in the north. It is NATO's ears and eyes in the north, and we follow and we share, and I think we increase security doing that way. We do it according to our own principle, which we call high north, low tension. It is not the purpose to bring up tension, but it is really our ambition and our responsibility to follow developments there in a responsible way. We are supporting NATO solidarity, being happy to be alongside Germany in Lithuania with our troops. We are also increasing our budget in the coming year, both in terms of capabilities and structure. And here, Germany is emerging as a very key partner, and I'm happy to see by the end of this decade that we will receive, buy, purchase submarines alongside Germany. Very important. We both have the F-35 capability, potential for cooperation, the P-8 patrol planes, potential for cooperation, and there is more military material which will be candidate for both industrial and military cooperation. Sweden and Finland's membership is, of course, a watershed in the Nordic region. And I think an example of where Putin made his miscalculations. Just 1 year ago, his claim was that there will be no new members of NATO. And I think it's important for history to remember the following. Finland's real decision, in my view, of making a change did not come 24th of February. It came with Putin's speech where he was dictating who could be in and who could be out. And the Finns are extremely wise on this issue, and they know their history well. And the New Year speech by President Niinistö was instrumental because he was saying this is our decision. And from that moment, I have been supporting that very actively. Norway and Finland both share borders with Russia. Finland's border is much longer. But we support Sweden and Finland joining. The Nordic region is a threat to none. Russia knows it well. But we have a collective responsibility of securing our security. And Finland and Sweden joining NATO will increase NATO's security. So let's hope the pieces will fall into place and NATO will be an even stronger alliance. We need close partnerships in the time to come. We need to work well together with the US, Europe, avoid division. Putin may have been counting on it. It failed. We are standing very closely together. One dimension of this security is what Chancellor Scholz just pointed at, namely military, the dimension of the energy infrastructure security, the resilience of protecting that. It is key to our societies. Norway has, in its energy sectors, 3 big land installations, 90 platforms on the shelf, and 9,000 kilometers of pipelines to the United Kingdom and to Europe. And I can tell you, we take well care of this infrastructure, and we have done so for decades. After February, we increased that protection by all kinds of different means. And I'm happy to note that Germany and other allies came uncalled for, were not kind of alarmist, but they came offering, sailing with us, supporting technologically how we monitor. But we need to go further on that, and that's why the Chancellor and I have agreed to propose an informal initiative to enhance security of undersea infrastructure. Can be pipelines, can be fiber, can be telecommunication. This is really the blood circulation of a modern economy. And we will raise later today with the Secretary General of NATO how we can enhance military and civil and police coordination to do this. We want to take it forward. NATO is relevant. How can we work with the private sector? And we believe this is the right thing to do. Then, shortly, if I may, to energy. I think last fall, when there was shortage in the storage capacity here in Germany and in other countries in Europe, I think we understood the logic of that after the invasion. That was part of the strategy, I would imagine, that Europe's energy security was put under pressure. And we have to learn that lesson. Putin's gas and energy war on Europe has to be met in solidarity. All Europeans feel the pain. And let me say here, as Norwegian Prime Minister, it is not in Norway's interest that there are high and volatile energy prices in Europe. And there are 3 major reasons for that. First, coming to Norway, high gas prices in Europe means high electricity prices in Norway. Really a tenfold in some circumstances. Norwegian households, they warm their houses by electricity, so that is hitting hard. Secondly, when Europe's industry is taking a beating, it affects our industry because we are partners. And thirdly, the instability coming from economic turmoil from energy prices hits our partners and allies, and we don't want that. And that's why we are working as much as we can with European Commission, with European partners, to bring stability to these markets, encourage our companies to conclude long-term agreements to get prices stabilized. Our main challenge and responsibility is to maintain and increase gas export to Europe. It's not me, Prime Minister, selling gas, it is the companies with licenses on the shelf. And they have increased their sales to Europe by 8%, representing about 100 terawatt hours. And I think that has allowed and contributed to the filling of storage capacity in Europe. And we will do whatever we can to maintain that high level. And let me make it clear, Norway will invite companies from Norway and abroad to continue to search for gas on the Norwegian shelf, close to that infrastructure which is established, close to where there are reservoirs, to maintain that energy security in the years to come. Getting through the winter and next winter will be tough. But let me say, the longer-term issue here is that we need more renewable energy. The core of the challenge is lack of energy. And as the Chancellor said, with Russian gas falling out, and if it falls out completely, there is a hole to be filled. We will do what we can to contribute, but the real answer here lies in succeeding the energy transition. And here too, Germany is leading. Norway wants to be part of that transition. We will be making a major launch of floating offshore wind installations with the ambition of producing 30 gigawatt hours by 2040. It means that we will start in the coming months to announce areas on the Norwegian shelf for that exploration. We are leading on carbon capture and storage. This is not theory anymore. We know how to do it. 2,000 to 3,000 meters under the seabed, safely storage of CO2, which will not leak. And we have enough capacity on the Norwegian shelf to take most of Europe's CO2 for many, many decades. But what we need to do for this, and for hydrogen, and for solar, and for renewable, is to build the infrastructure, secure and strengthen the grid. And we need to get private investors along to invest and see the opportunities, but we have to build the value chains. We have to develop the market and the demand. This, I believe, is really calling for sophisticated political cooperation between friends and allies. And we are friends and allies, and we can do this together. Blue and green hydrogen is part of the future for Germany's industry. I visited Siemens today, and I saw how they are building turbines that can first run on gas and can then be easily transformed into hydrogen. This is part of the future. So, dear friends, you spoke about, Olaf, a mental Zeitenwende. I think this is appropriate. We have to be, as democracies, adapting to realities. The biggest challenge we face is climate change. This is the biggest threat to the future. And if we move to the north, you can observe it by seeing the ice melting. So we need to mobilize our resources so that we can really address this. And the paradox of the drama in Ukraine is that it is actually pushing and forwarding the transition to the renewable energy age, cutting our emission by 2030, getting to zero by 2050. The biggest opportunity is the potential of people, their creativity, and the strength of democracy. And I believe this is what we have to rely on and count on for our defense. So for all you who represent our defense, it is about geography, it is about capacity, it's about technology, but it is really about shared values. And I'm happy to be in a country where we share the values and feel the solidarity. Thank you much for your attention.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for your tour d'horizon on current security and defense policy as a comprehensive approach, actually. Unfortunately, we let you not off the hook. We have prepared a special forum and interview with you. Your discussion partners will be our Congress President Wolfgang Hellmich, Member of Parliament, and Dr. Eva-Charlotte Proll, Editor and Chief Digital Officer of the Behörden Spiegel Group. We have some 25 minutes now for this interview, and I would kindly ask you to come to the podium.
Your Excellency, Prime Minister Støre, Herr Bundeskanzler, a very warm welcome. Also by me, we are very grateful to have you here for a short interview on the political issues of the changing security environment. We called it Zeitenwende. Certainly, the aggressive war of Russia against Ukraine is dominating somehow the discussion on future European and transatlantic security. So my first question, if I may, goes to you, Prime Minister Støre. What can Norway and Germany do together to bolster international activities to end the war in Ukraine?
Well, I think that first of all, we have to see to it that Ukraine is supported in this unprecedented attack that they are facing. So I think what we have done since February has been right to provide adequate military support. We are going to engage in major training. And I think here Norway and Germany are also working alongside. And we have to be looking after cohesion among allies, that we don't allow splits in that. That's the first initial stage. Then historians would argue that every conflict ends at a negotiating table. That is not actually true, but most of them do. But for this war to end in one way or another, we have to see to it that Ukraine can maintain the basic principles of being a sovereign state. So the conditions for that have to be clear. But I believe that we should be, and I believe it's possible to argue that we support Ukraine's right to defend itself while we encourage something beyond war for this conflict. And the third dimension, I think, at some stage, countries like Norway and Germany and the European Union and allies of the free world have to start thinking about what will the security order in Europe be beyond this war. Because I believe that there is no way we can artificially take a pair of scissors and cut Russia out of the map and say it doesn't exist anymore. You know, we thought we had a toolbox for European security that could deal with conflicts between countries politically. And Putin decided that he had another option, which was to go massively militarily. We have to prepare for that to look after our security. But I believe that, you know, amongst ourselves, we should also reflect what will be the vision for the European security order beyond this war. But on the road to that, I think Ukraine needs to be supported, and I support the Chancellor when he maintains some contact in the direction of Moscow, so that at least there is a channel there should the opportunity arise.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Herr Bundeskanzler, from your perspective, how do you see the chances of influencing the way to ceasefire, peace, security, and full regain of sovereignty of Ukraine?
Thank you for the question. All is about this topic, I think, but we know that this is very difficult, and so the first thing to do is what Jonas already mentioned. We have to continuously support the Ukraine, that it can defend its own territory, its own country, and we are doing quite well. If I look at the situation and the development of the war, this is really a very successful defense the Ukraine is organizing, but also a very successful support with the military means that are necessary for doing so. On the other hand, we always have to be very clear on fighting against escalations of the war. And this is why we were so clear in saying that nuclear weapons should not be used. And my plea for that was very intense when I was in Peking, but also in other places discussing this in the last weeks. And In the end, we agreed on this very clear sentence also in Indonesia at the G20 meeting. And this really had the outcome that Russia was just on its own with no one supporting it with another direction. And if I see it right, for a certain moment, we make very clear that this weapons will not be used, and this is really one of the outcomes of going around. And for taking a broader picture, when we discussed in the beginning of the year, after the Russian war of aggression started, whether we should participate in G20 or not, I very much supported the idea of that we will all participate. And we agreed on this when we met in Elmau in Germany. We also started there a debate which is not just restricted to the, as Putin always calls it, global West. We invited very strong democracies from Asia, from Africa, from the South of America, like Indonesia, like India, like South Africa, like Senegal, which is heading the African Union, and Argentina being the president of the Latin American and Caribbean states. And this was, I think, a very big step that made it possible that in the end, such a decision could be taken with clear words on the Russian aggression against Ukraine in the statement, but also very clear words on the use of nuclear weapons. But the strategy of escalating the war because of the difficulties Russia has on the battleground is not just restricted to the use of nuclear weapons. What we see today, all the missiles, the cruise missiles, bombing energy infrastructure, heating infrastructure, water supply in Ukraine, is really the attempt to get into a situation where Russia could demoralize the Ukrainian resistance, and we see it is not working, though the bombardment is very, very hard, and there is a lot of destructed infrastructure. And it is also hoping that there will be fear in Europe that new waves of refugees from Ukraine might come, and that this also could change the scenario. But it's not doing, because we are united and we are acting together. And that is now the moment where we can say there is only one way to get to peace, and this is that Russia is ready to withdraw its troops and is ready for a fair peace agreement with Ukraine, which is not a dictated peace as it was planned by Russia before the beginning of the war and after the beginning of the war. And this is nothing that will work directly from one moment to the other, but this is a strategy that in the end will succeed.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister and Herr Bundeskanzler. Now we'll give the moderation to Mrs. Proll.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, from a Norwegian perspective, how would a new security environment after war look like, and how will Norway act towards Russia?
Well, it's a kind of futuristic question. I think, the fundamentals for Norway will continue to be building and strengthening a modern, capable defense, national defense, which is very closely linked to our NATO membership from the beginning, offering our NATO allies training opportunities in Norway, working closely with them. Now, in the coming time, working closely with Sweden and Finland to take our defense cooperation, which has developed over the last years, into a new phase as we hopefully will become allies. Maintaining our close partnership with the European Union through the agreements we have, which makes us an integral part of the internal market. These are the fundamentals. So for a country with our location and with our coast and with our northern Arctic outlook, this has to be the beginning. And then I think we have to start, working on that. How can you secure the right of the small, medium and large states in Europe to have its integrity? And Europe has been on the right path before, and Germany has been leading on that before. And I think we have at one stage have to start reflecting on that. when it comes to Russia, you know, it's a paradox. You know, as foreign minister, when I dealt with Russia, we dealt extensively on negotiating a lot of cooperation in the north. We settled a 40-year border dispute in the Arctic Ocean through very modern, updated negotiations. The same people are still there, but you know, it's like a completely different regime, or perhaps it isn't. And that is where this is Russia's drama in a way that we are facing. But as I'm saying, you cannot envisage a future Europe where you can take Russia out of the map. So we who are based on our democratic values and solving our issues democratically and peacefully, have to envisage how that can happen. But it's a big open question what Russia will be during and after the war, what kind of forces will prevail. And in the meantime, we have to be vigilant and stand closely together.
Thank you. Herr Bundeskanzler, how would Germany act formally having a strong partnership with Russia?
At this stage, I would say it's not about partnership. To be very honest, Russia spoiled the peace order we worked on for so many decades. And we agreed there should be never again the attempt to change borders by force. And what Russia is doing today is going back to the imperialistic approach of the 19th, 18th, 17th century, where just the stronger country thinks it could just take the territory of the neighbor, understanding neighbors as just hinterland, and a place they can give rules to be followed. And this can never be accepted. We have to go back to a situation where we agree again that borders will not be changed by force. And just to add this, if we go to history and look in history books where borders were, and take this as a reason for changing borders again, we would be at war for hundreds of years. Or if we just look, as Putin is doing, what kind of people are speaking similar as I do, we would have also a lot of reasons for war in Europe. And this is something we will not accept. We have to go back to the agreements which we had in the last decades and which were the basis for peace and security order in Europe. And for Russia, this also means that it accepts that aside of its borders, there are open-minded societies, open societies, democracies that follow completely a different way of how they are governed and how they attract people. And he has to, and Putin has to accept that this is happening right at his borders, and he has to make it by himself, not to be threatened by the attractiveness of democracy and freedom, which is obviously there. But in the end, there is no aggression coming from the member states of the European Union. There is no aggression coming from NATO, and all questions of common security could be solved and discussed. There is a willingness to do so. Even before the war, the United States president said, yes, we could discuss on arms controls again. We could have discussions on the questions where missiles are deployed, and that obviously no missiles reaching Russia will be deployed in Ukraine. There was no planning like this. It was just one of the false reasons Putin used and uses for starting his war. But we can come back to a peace order that worked and make it safe again if there is a willingness in Russia to go back to this peace order.
Thank you. Herr Bundeskanzler, Prime Minister, how can we assist each other in improving the protection and the resilience of critical infrastructure, for example, in the Baltic Sea, above the surface and subsurface? You have mentioned an initiative. Herr Bundeskanzler.
So the first is we already cooperate. So it is nothing about the future we are discussing. We are really actively informing each other. And as Jonas already reported, there is the German Navy acting together with the Norwegian Navy to secure the infrastructure. There is German police ships doing the same. And we are intensely cooperating to understand the situation also with the companies responsible for the infrastructure. But we think we have to go a step further and establish something which is a good cooperation to safeguard the critical infrastructure that is mentioned here. And this is why we propose to the General Secretary of NATO to think about whether we could do something when NATO is taking the lead for organizing this cooperation. And I think this would be a very good step forward.
Thank you. All right. So I would like to hand over for the last question to Mr. Hellmich. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Your Excellency Prime Minister Støre, Herr Bundeskanzler, before we close this short interview session, I would kindly ask you to comment on national security strategies for the nations. As we know, Norway has, for example, has a total defense concept, as well as some national strategies, a national cybersecurity strategy. How do you both see the development of the comprehensive national security strategy? Perhaps Herr Bundeskanzler first, then possible an additional comment by you, Prime Minister Støre. Herr Bundeskanzler, or Herr Prime Minister. You decided yourself.
Well, thank you, Bundeskanzler. It's a big question. You know, we come from Madrid, where we adopted a new strategic concept for NATO, which I attended in 2010 when we had the previous concept. So in 12 years, a lot has changed, and I think NATO reflects that we are updating our understanding of many dimensions, that we can have an updated concept. In Norway, we have two important commission works going on. One is a kind of group of representatives from the different parties conceptualizing what our national defense should be. But we also have a more kind of total national security perspective being hammered out in another commission, which is looking at how the interface is between the civil sector and the military sector. And as we experience now in these days with tensions in Europe, we see how much those are related. So the measures that my chief of defense is taking in the military circles follows a logic well aligned with NATO, but what we do in the civilian side has quite a different approach in terms of methodology. And the total strength and the coherence and resilience of a society is a combination of the two. So what I envisage is that there has to be strong link between the civilian and the military in one country, and then if that country is a NATO country, it has to be reflected also in the strategic concept of our alliance. And if we have those two dimensions in place, we can do as the Chancellor and I did today, to say that let us supplement how we look after our energy infrastructure, and we know what channels we can use. And NATO is a good channel here, and we can develop also bilateral cooperation as we do.
The first thing to say is that the most important task that we should prioritize is to defend the territory of our countries and of our alliance. And we learned from this Russian aggression against Ukraine that this is the most important task we are facing, and we have to take a lot of decisions that make this easier as it would have been in the last years, because there was a completely different strategy followed, thinking about how we can act somewhere abroad and overseas. But this is just one task. The more important and the most important task of our alliance and of NATO and all the decisions we take on our defense strategy is that we are able to defend the territory of the alliance, of our friends and neighbors, and that we are strong enough for doing so. The second is that when we are discussing about strategies of security, that we understand that there is a completely new global situation with many relatively strong countries that are already there or that will attend at the global sphere and will discuss on the future of security and peace in the world together with us and with our alliances. And this is why I think we have to be very clear in understanding the new situation of a multipolar world, trying to make it cooperating in a multilateral way, but also using the chances of globalization and being interconnected to the rest of the world, also with trade and all the things we are doing, but doing it in a way that we can be sure that not problems in one region occur as a problem for us in our countries. And this is the lesson that definitely we have to learn from the Russian aggression against Ukraine and the willingness of Russia to use energy as a weapon, which they are doing. And I think when we follow these two main aspects, we will be easily ready to draw our strategy.
Thank you very much. We must come to the end. It's always the same. Sometimes we are at the end of this interview. Your Excellency, Prime Minister Støre, Bundeskanzler, also on behalf of Frau Dr. Proll, I would like to extend my sincere thanks for the opportunity for this short interview. Many thanks for this situation here on the stage. And we wish both of you all the success you need to govern the challenges lying ahead us in Norway, Germany, and Europe. Thank you for the interview and all the best for your future ways. Thank you very much.
Sechs. Wir brauchen
sechs. Zwei Mikrofone. Zwei Mikrofone. Vielleicht können wir ihn noch ein bisschen weiter nach vorne stellen. Dann können wir
Excellencies, Generals and Admirals, we are approaching the high-level military forum on the High North security and military challenges. Aim of this forum is to define what the High North means geographically and politically for NATO and Europe's area of responsibility today, and to discuss persistent and emerging challenges jeopardizing the stability of the region. And I ask kindly for some kind of silence here, please. And what we should do in the military realm to maintain peace and security. I would like to introduce the chairman and the panelists, please. Lieutenant General retired Ben Hodges is the former commanding general of US Army Europe. He's now the senior advisor to Human Rights First, a non-profit, non-partisan international human rights organization based in New York, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. Prior to joining Human Rights First, he held the Pershing Chair in Strategic Studies at the Center of European Policy Analysis. General Hodges' last two assignments were Commander NATO Allied Land Command 2012 to 2014 in Izmir, Turkey, and Commanding General United States Army Europe 2014-2017 in Wiesbaden in Germany. Welcome back, sir. Vice Admiral Jonas Hagren, and I think you can come up now, please, because then if I introduce you, the people can see you. Vice Admiral Hagren is the Chief of Defense Staff of the Swedish Armed Forces. Before that, he was head of Plans and Policy Department Defense Staff. In 2015, he was Force Commander, EU Naval Force Somalia, 19th rotation. His other appointments include Head of Naval Department Training and Procurement Staff, Commander, 1st Submarine Flotilla, Karlskrona, Staff Officer responsible for the strategic planning of the Swedish military deployment in Liberia and in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as submarine assignments. Admiral Hagen, a very warm welcome. General Timo Kivinen is the commander of the Finnish Defense Forces. He joined the Finnish Army in 1978 and was commissioned in 1982 after completing his officer education at the Military Academy. He completed the General Staff course at the War College in 1993. General Kivinen studied at the Royal College of Defence Studies in the UK, and he holds a master's degree of the King's College in London. He was also Deputy Commander in the Bosnia and Defence Attaché and Commander of the Utti Jäger Regiment. He served as Brigade Commander, Deputy of Chief of Staff Strategy in the Defence Command and Chief of the Defence Command until 2019. He assumed his current position. Sir, welcome. General Erik Kristoffersen is the Chief of the Defence of Norway. Before that, he was Chief of the Norwegian Army, Chief of the Norwegian Home Guard, and Chief J579 Norwegian Joint Headquarters. Other appointments include having been Deputy Commander, Norwegian Special Operations Command, Squadron Commander, Long-Range Recce Patrol assignments and duty in Recce battalions. He also studied in the Military Academy in Oslo, the War College in Carlisle, and Quantico US Marine Corps Command and Staff Course. He served in Lebanon and 5 times in Afghanistan. Sir, very warm welcome. General Flemming Lenfer is the Chief of the Defense of Denmark. An Air Force officer by profession and air defender, he commanded a Hawk battalion. He attended the Defense Academy, also as an instructor in the Air Force Academy. General Lenfer was head and chief of the Plans and Programs Branch Division in the Defense Command, chief of the Danish Defense Acquisition and Logistics Organization, chief of Staff of Policy and Coordination, and Chief Joint Operations. He assumed his position as Director, Danish Ministry of Defense Acquisition and Logistics Organization and National Armaments Director in 2017 and was appointed to Chief of Defense in 2020. Also to you, sir, a cordial welcome. Vice Admiral Olivier Lebat is a fighter pilot, naval aviation by profession, and joined the French Navy in 1987. Since 820, he is the Maritime Prefect Atlantic, Commander Atlantic Maritime Zone and Defense He commanded the tactical staff, French maritime force, the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, the frigate Akoni, and the 17th Fighter Squadron. He has flown 100 combat missions as a fighter pilot in Yugoslavia, Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He was Commander Naval Air Force Group and Naval Force Indian Ocean, Maritime Component Group in Daesh, and on Central Command level, his positions include Operations Deputy, Military Ops Med-C, and Head International Relations for the Chief of the French Navy. Admiral, also very warm welcome. I hand over to General Hodges now for the forum. We've got about at least 1 hour.
So 3 hours until General Fulmer buys drinks for everybody is what I've heard. So what a panel, and I've never been somewhere where the warm-up act before I spoke were 2 prime ministers. So I think they did a pretty good job, though, and so I think all of you are ready now to talk seriously about security in the high north and the challenges. Actually, joking aside, I was impressed. I mean, you heard two leaders who were very clear, strong, and it encouraged me. And of course, I get asked all the time, like I think most of you do, you know, will we continue to support Ukraine? Will the European capitals continue to support Ukraine? Will the United States continue to support? And so what I heard tonight, as well as the results of the midterm elections in the U.S., I feel very confident. Okay, so the war in Ukraine started not in February, but in 2014. So we've had almost 9 years, a little over 8.5 years now to study what's been going on and to watch how Ukraine has defended, how Russia has attacked. We know from thousands of years of history that a war is a test of will and it's a test of logistics. If that is still true, and assuming the West will continue to support Ukraine, then it is clear that Ukraine will win this war and regain sovereignty over all of its territory, including Crimea, and I think by next year. It is perhaps, however, too early to draw lasting conclusions, but I think there are several observations worth mentioning that will frame our discussion tonight. And I'll be interested in hear how these leaders who are responsible for most of Northern Europe for its security, how you will reflect on these observations. Number one, hard power is back. It's no longer feasible or realistic to think that we can deter Russia or any other power with soft power only. When the opponent does not believe in soft power, then we have to act accordingly. If the other guy brings a tank, we need a tank. Number two, kinetic effects produce results. The destruction of the Moskva in the Black Sea, that changed the maritime domain completely because of the sinking of one ship. The attack on the power grid, that's producing a result. The effect of long-range precision weapons, that is producing results. Number three, legacy systems still work. Most of what is being used in Ukraine is technology from 30 years ago. Tanks, fixed-wing aircraft, rockets, air and missile defense systems, Hawk missile, anti-ship capabilities. There are, of course, some new capabilities being introduced, but the point is there is no one silver bullet. At the end of the day, it's still going to require women and men in uniform who are properly trained, well-equipped, and well-led. Number four, precision can defeat mass, but it needs time. So if Ukraine is going to defeat Russian mass with precision weapons, we are going to have to make sure they have an endless supply of those precision weapons. Number five, obviously, industrial capacity is essential, especially for the production of ammunition. No country in this room, including my own, has enough ammunition for our own purposes, let alone to continue supplying Ukraine. So how do we get defense industry to increase its output? And that really is up to us, to our civilian leaders. And then finally, the last point is that there is no substitute for positive, galvanizing civilian leadership that can explain what the outcome it must be and then have the political will to deliver resources to help us achieve that strategic outcome. So that's the framing for our conversation tonight. It's also intimidating being surrounded by people who speak English better than I do, but being from North Florida, I'm somewhat accustomed to that. My first question is going to be to General Kivinen and to Admiral Hagren. The day that both of your countries join NATO, the alliance gets immediately better. I mean, starting from the first minute. We know that because two nations that bring strong liberal democratic societies, resilient societies, and militaries that are loaded with talented women and men. Where do you see making your first contributions? Where do you want to put, what missions do you sign up for, but what positions do you want to sign up for? Sir.
Yeah, if I start on, so if I first just shortly set the scene where we are in the accession and integration process, I mean military accession and integration process, which is separated from the political process. And that process proceeds, and of course we have done nationally what we need to do, but at the same time discuss it with the NATO side, NATO, especially ACT, supports us in our accession and integration efforts, but at the same time we are discussing with SHAPE and relevant the Joint Forces Command. And my advice to our political leaders that we should contribute in the beginning of when we are full members. But it's in the end of the day, it's political decision, and but we are ready to contribute in all domains. I mean, using land, air, and our naval capabilities.
Admiral.
Well, that's Can you hear me now? Yeah, thank you. Great. Humbling to sit here and also to try and say something different from my Finnish friend here, because we are in this accession period parallel. But as you might have read, our Chief of Defense has given his advice to the government quite recently on the 1st of November. And the advice from the CHOD and also from Swedish Armed Forces is that we want to contribute early in the process. And also we have exemplified this, of course, within maybe in the Baltic Air Policing, Standing Naval Maritime Group, or within the Enhanced Forward Presence. Of course, early on there will be a discussion also about how much we can contribute. But then looking on further if you look at the High North as a specific region, we will also look at then the advice has also come on reinforcing our military presence up in the High North, mostly on the infrastructure side, as that is also a potential that we see. So all the trilateral, bilateral, but also multilateral cooperation that we have been in as a partner needs now to be complemented by the NATO membership, and all the potential is there. So I think it's really about operationalizing that.
Would you say that the Finnish population is prepared for the idea that a company, an infantry company of Finnish soldiers would be part of a Canadian-led enhanced forward presence battle group in Latvia to be deployed outside of Finland in a NATO mission?
Just to clarify that we have already deployed in the past battalion size unit to a NATO mission. But of course that's been a crisis management in Kosovo. But yes, population will not say no.
Right. Well, I can't wait to see Finnish and Swedish officers and NCO Scholz talk about infrastructure, energy infrastructure, pipelines, And of course, several of the nations up here have very remote islands and outposts that have to be defended and that are constantly being threatened. How does Denmark and Norway and also the French Navy, how do you protect pipelines and undersea cables? Sir.
Well, then, first of all, thank you for having us here, and it's quite a sad time. We just lost to Australia in the World Cup, so we are out of there, so that's about it. When it comes to critical infrastructure...
The American team is ready to offer some tips.
I know. That's the reason why I mentioned it, so yeah. No, we learned a lot about critical infrastructure, and when it comes to Denmark, at least, I think that we right now are studying what is seabed warfare all about right now. And I must say that it's a steep learning curve, because to be frank, nobody is protecting those critical infrastructure pieces for the time being. I know all the efforts that are done up in Norway, but when it comes to the critical infrastructure as such, I think for a long period, at least in Danish thinking, I think that we thought that undersea warfare was anti-submarine warfare, but it's very much more than just that. So when it comes to critical infrastructure, I'm trying to put the point that build more of it, then the word critical goes away. But until that happens, I think that we need to really be aware of what is going on the seabed when it comes to the critical infrastructure. I think that maybe fiber optic cables alongside the critical infrastructure could give some warning. Then we need to have drones, bigger drones that really can build up a recognized picture of what is going on the seabed. And as a third point I would like to make, I think that we need ships and other kind of resources that could be a responder to incidents that could take care of what we have seen in the Baltic Sea. We in Denmark, we own 2 of the leakage at the Nord Stream and Sweden also. And I think we have learned a lot because we went there, the Danish Navy, and we did what we could with the tools we have right now. But it's quite easy to understand that we need more tools in the future. Thanks.
Would you mind being more specific on that? I mean, when you say you learned some things from that incident?
Yeah, the fact is that it was intentionally. It was huge explosions, and we didn't have a fair warning, to be frank. So this is, of course, unacceptable. So we need to have some warning and a system that can really monitor at a 24/7, 365 basis what is going on the critical infrastructure. The good news is it's not moving like submarines, so it's not the same complicated task as to hunt submarines.
There was a time when Denmark had pretty extensive anti-submarine capabilities there at the Straits. Mm-hmm. Are those still available, or could they be deployed relatively quick?
They are not available in the old sense of the word, because as a kind of the peace dividend, we got rid of the invasion things we had on hand. We have, of course, seen the necessity to be a part of the operations up in the Geo Gap. So in a few years' time, I think we will convert 2 of our frigates to be anti-submarine hunters and try to be a part of the operations that are going on up there. But it will take some time to acquire those tools again.
Admiral, so how do you, with your huge responsibilities, how will you try and protect undersea cables that we all depend on, as well as pipelines, and the sort of things that the General just talked about? How is France approaching that?
Yes. After the last event in Baltic Sea, we had two axes of effort. The first one was to provide some support to our allied nation. We propose support to Danish, Sweden, and Norway. And today we have one frigate patrolling offshore Norway to add support for the Norwegian Navy. Second axis is to implement our new last seabed warfare strategy, which was drawn 1-2 years ago. So we have to implement. That needs more capabilities, especially UAV and or kind of devices to explore and to control the bottom of the sea, and also some know-how. And as it was said, we have also to monitor all the surface, all the activity with big data, artificial intelligence, and also the human brain and know-how in the way to analyze the situation. For that, it's necessary to convince all the actors at sea, the state actors at sea, not only military, but also people in the customs, for the fishery survey, for etc., to be nowadays also an actor to detect and to how to say that, to alert in case of something strange is happening. We know that today, because of hybrid way to conduct the war, we could have civilian ship disturbing, working on the bottom of the sea, and it's very difficult to detect that. So that's the reason why we have to upgrade way to work.
Yeah, I think seabed warfare is a term that I'm going to start using. I'd never thought about that. So, Admiral, the U.S. Navy, of course, has probably about half the number of ships they think they really need. And that's not a problem that's going to get solved anytime soon. Would you mind, given what your missions are and the size of the area for which you're responsible, how many more different type platforms do you need?
As large as possible. We have to be able to manage to conduct operations, high-level operations with carrier strike group, and we have one, and we can provide this means for NATO, and we are trained for that. We have also to conduct a lot of anti-submarine missions. It's something where it's very important today, because we can observe a kind of overflow of Russian power in the north of Atlantic, especially by their nuclear submarine. And you can observe that today, these nuclear submarines are the only one military component without any damage because of attrition during the current war in Ukraine. So it's always a big concern for us, a point of attention and action. And of course, we need to have a lot of patrollers and satellites observations, and as I said, ability to manage all these intelligence and to detect in this very complex awareness situation, to detect the point to see and to counter.
Thanks, sir. I am going to come back in a little while and ask about if there's a recognized maritime common operating picture, but I'll give you a moment on that. Sir, Norway, a huge country without a huge population. Your neighbors, Sweden and Finland, most of their forces tend to be focused on the southern part of their country, and I think most of Norway tends to be focused in the northern part. Is that because of completely different threats, or is it the way the population is, or is my math wrong?
No, your map is perfectly right, Ben, and you know that. You have been Commander U.S. Army Europe, so you know the map very well. And but it's a very valid point. And I will say that with Sweden and Finland now joining NATO, for the Scandinavian peninsula and for the Nordic countries, and I think we should include Iceland, Greenland into this. It means that the map and the security policy and the alliances are finally overlapping. So it's the same, which gives us a lot of opportunities to strengthen security in the northern flank of NATO. But of course, Sweden and Finland are joining NATO, so we are all part of the same NATO organization. When it comes to Russia, I have said, and I still say, that President Putin's big lie is that he always said that NATO was a threat to Russia. What we see now is he knows perfectly well we're not going to invade Russia, because he has moved all his land forces, his conventional forces, down to Ukraine, even with Finland and Sweden joining NATO. So he knows that is not going to happen, and that, of course, makes the strategic nuclear weapons more important for Russia, and those are right outside our borders. And then, what options do you have when you are conventionally weakened with your land forces? You can start doing other things, and then we come into those threats against underwater infrastructure, critical infrastructure, whatever it is. So I think the way to respond to that, as you started with, we need to integrate. We need to integrate in all domains in NATO. Space domain, that gives us a lot of surveillance. We need to integrate our maritime forces. We need to integrate our land, air, but also our cyber defense, so we can stand against this threat and we are not challenged. And as Fleming also said, we need redundancy. So we need, because if you have redundancy, the threat is less. We are not as exposed to those threats. So there's a lot of ways we need to work on this. For Norway now, with the current situation, what we are doing is what my Chief of Intelligence Service said earlier today, is that we are focusing on, of course, deterrence, but also to detect if there is anything going on those pipelines. And we are almost finished now searching all the pipelines, 9,000 kilometers, and so far we haven't found anything suspicious on those pipelines. But we need to continue doing that, and we need to do it together with industry, because they have most capabilities to actually search.
So Svalbard, that part of Norway that's always cut off on all maps and NATO headquarters, because you try to include all of Turkey and all of, so that little island gets cut off. But it seems that's a special interest to Russia, and you hear about Svalbard all the time. How do you protect that? How do you defend that?
So the Spitsbergen Islands is demilitarized, meaning that we don't have any permanent military installations there. You have the Svalbard Treaty, which also allows other nations to be present. So Russia is actually present in Svalbard, in Barentsburg, with a small community focusing on mining. It's a population of mixed Russian and Ukrainians actually working together there right now. But of course, we continue to do surveillance. We continue to work on security. And of course, we're also going to defend Svalbard if that's protected, because we see it as definitely part of our sovereign territory. But on a regular basis, you don't have any permanent military presence on Svalbard.
Okay, so Sweden, Admiral, back a few years ago when there was when our Baltic allies, specifically Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and also Poland, were getting very uneasy about what Russia was doing. There was a tendency, I think, in some countries to kind of be dismissive. Well, those guys were always worried, everybody settle down. But when Sweden made the decision to put troops back on Gotland Island, I mean, that was a statement that clearly Sweden thought there was a need for that. Could you explain, or would you mind sharing what was the strategic thinking? What is the significance of Gotland Island and the Baltic Sea and to Sweden?
Well, there's no map here, but if you look at, Gotland is kind of the key to the Baltic Sea, or one of the key strategic areas or islands. And you have to see Gotland also in the context. You have Åland, Gotland, Bornholm as important key islands to either defend or have a part of the control of the Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea is very close quarters. It's a shallow sea. So if you sit on Gotland with the forces, of course, it needs to be. It's also the best way to defend the Baltic states, or at least you need to own Gotland. So for us in 2014, after 2014, was of course a game changer when we started to increase our capabilities, but also when we saw what was going on, it was important to do something actively, to use what we had. We had by that time been able to decommission all our forces on Gotland. Up to that, we had some home guard units left. So then we decided to go back to Gotland, rotate army units to the island. Of course, a lot of strategic communication in that, but at the same time, from then on, to build. So the regiment has been re-established, one regiment. There used to be 5 regiments there during the Cold War. But with that said, you can defend Gotland also from the air and the maritime. So it was an important signal in the beginning. Now we're establishing a regiment which has been established, but we will also establish more units complementing it, so it will be a small-sized brigade in the future on Gotland.
General Kivinen, you've got several thousand islands, I think, also. How does Finland make sure that those islands don't become or not used by Russians, whether it's special forces or Navy, or how do you defend all the islands?
Yes, we have archipelago there, but we have used to operate there. And what comes to surveillance activities, it's not only defense forces who are there. We have our border guards and also civilian authorities who are tracking sea traffic and so on. And in Finland, you know, if you go to a remote place on an island, if there are any civilians, they have eyes and ears as well. So that's how it functions, due to our history we have. If I may go to Åland Islands, which was mentioned by Jonas, it's demilitarized zone in peacetime, but my task is to defend it in a military crisis. And we have a plan to defend it. And then even though military is not allowed to be present there to deploy there in peacetime, we have a footprint there because border guards are there. It's a multi-role agency, and one of the tasks is to work for me. So they have a military task in the legislation as well. So I provide all the military equipment to them from my budget. So it's functioning well, the cooperation with them, especially in the current situation, and we are doing a lot together. And then our Navy, including the coastal defense piece of Navy, it's organized in Finland, the coastal defense, to be part of the Navy. It's developed and tailor-made to operate in shallow waters and in archipelago. So, yes.
Thanks, sir. So, staying with the Scandinavian Peninsula, the topic is military mobility. So the United States has for decades kept equipment in Norway. And I'm trying to imagine how that would all move from Norway through Sweden, either to Finland or perhaps into Estonia. And of course, Sweden has, I think you created some regiments that are specifically to help with that kind of enablement. But how connected are you land-wise, rail or roads through that kind of terrain?
So I think that's the beauty of many years of Nordic defense cooperation, which started long ago, long before Finland and Sweden applied for NATO membership. So we have been talking about Nordic defense cooperation and trying to exploit the possibilities for a long time. And if you look at what we now have called Exercise Nordic Response 24, we try to link an exercise called Steadfast Defender, which is about to move large troops from the US and Canada over to Europe. We link that with an exercise between Greenland, Iceland, and UK called Joint Warrior, where you keep the sea lines of communication open in those straits, and then you can end up with what we call Nordic response, where we receive support into Scandinavia. And then when you look at the map again, you will see that the same sort of possibilities that we had during the Cold War, that we still keep in Norway to receive Allied support, fits well into the defense of the whole Scandinavian peninsula. So if you look in the north, you have a railroad going from Narvik into Sweden with roads going up in the high north. And then you have the same in where the US Marine Corps have prepositioned their material, roads and possibilities to move material across the peninsula. And you can extend it all the way down to the south. And then you also have the possibility to use the Baltic Sea. So I think the military integration of Sweden and Finland into NATO will take a very short time. They're already there. They have been together with us in Afghanistan for so many years. We have trained and exercised together. We have worked together. It's an easy military task. So we are only waiting for the political decision, basically.
I'm with you.
And there's only 2 countries left. So.
Well, we heard today that Hungary is going to get it done, I think, in December. And I think the Swedish and Finnish foreign ministers were with Minister Çavuşoğlu in Bucharest yesterday. I'm sure that was fun. They, okay, Admiral. So is there a recognized maritime common operating picture where you or Admiral Hagren or Mar 4 can look at the big board and see everything, where everybody sees all the surface activity there is and various. Is there a common operating picture for the maritime domain?
So, we have several ways to improve that. First, of course, is a cooperation, exchange of maritime picture within all NATO members. It works very well. And thanks to that, we have a better strategic depth, which is very important. Strategic depth, I think, will become a bigger challenge for the future because of the accelerated global warming in the north, in Arctic Sea. And what was before a deadlock will become, in the future, an open maritime route, the northeast route, but even bigger route. And so, with possibility to shift from Pacific to Atlantic very quickly. So, of course, it's a new parameter we have to take in account to preserve our strategic depth. Second, I would say challenge for us is whatever could happen very close to our coastline with a new kind of hybrid activities. I spoke already about that. We can observe some civilian ships, not military or very well known, identified, but something very new, arriving in our area and trying to destroy or to do something on the cable, for example, just close to our approaches. So it's very important to increase a lot our ability to detect such kind of illegal activities. I don't know why they could do that. We observe this kind of activity already. But probably is to test the European resilience. If you cut a cable, what could happen on the territory? If you cut 2, 3, 4, of course, the consequences will be much more difficult to tackle with. And so I think we have to reorganize all our assets working at sea to be, for everybody, an actor of detection and of this kind of illegal activity. I have the chance to have a double hat. I'm not only in charge of military operations, but I am also préfet maritime. That means I'm in charge to coordinate all the French administration which worked at sea. So I spoke about custom, maritime affairs, fishery control, etc. So I want to make all these actors some effector to detect and to contribute to the maritime awareness.
Okay. General Leffer, so for Denmark, I mean, you obviously would have an interest in a common operating picture, and my sense is that there is not one place that all NATO countries and soon-to-be NATO countries can see the same thing. And is that policy, or is that technology, or am I wrong that everybody can see everything?
Well, you asked the admiral whether he had a situational awareness on the maritime domain. I would argue there are more domains when it comes to the maritime picture. At least for Denmark and the near abroad in Denmark. I'm not talking about Greenland. I come to that. But the near abroad in Denmark, on the maritime side, on the surface side, we have a pretty good picture on what is going on. No doubt about that. But when it comes to a picture on the seabed, I'm not certain that we have a picture at all, but it's definitely not recognized. So that's the reason why I mentioned before that at least I need to learn a lot about seabed warfare and what it's all about, what can be done about it to get a recognized picture and to get a picture of the normality on the seabed, so that you are able to discover if a new refrigerator is put on the seabed somewhere, so that you can do something about it before it's too late. But that applies to Denmark. And as you know, the Kingdom of Denmark is more than Denmark. It's also about the Faroe Islands and not least Greenland. And it's a whole different situation up there, especially in Greenland, because there's a lot of critical infrastructure up there. And what is not the same in Greenland compared to Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark is there's no infrastructure up there. So a lot of land mass and not that much infrastructure. So you are really on your own. So logistics is what it's all about when you want to do military operations up in the Greenlandic area. So just to survive is really quite hard, because there's no, as I said, infrastructure at all. So that also gives some basis for considerations. What is then keeping your sovereignty? And at the end of the day, how do you defend an area like this one? So we talk a lot about that too in Denmark, because in fact the Kingdom of Denmark is two separate areas of operations.
You know, if you'd have sold Greenland to President Trump like he asked, we would already have McDonald's there and all kinds of other infrastructure. So
feel free to try. I think you'll be surprised how hard it is.
Sir.
So just a comment on the picture. I think that's one of the big challenges. And I remember a colleague of mine from another nation said some years ago, if he wanted to see what NATO was doing, it was easier to call Moscow than to call Brussels. Just because we didn't report in everything we were doing, you know, so we didn't report in to NATO what each and every nation was doing. We reported in what was under NATO command, but not all the national operations we were still doing. So I realized when I became the Chief of Defense that we didn't report into NATO maritime patrol aircraft flying national missions. We didn't report in Coast Guard vessels sailing around Svalbard Islands. So we need to build that common picture, and I think that's a very valid point, because from the other side, everything is NATO or allied or friends activity, but we tend to only report what's under NATO command for each and every time, which is just a small portion of what all of European countries are doing together. So I think that's still a challenge, Ben, that we don't have a recognized blue picture from NATO forces, but we are working on it. Yeah.
No, and I think it is a problem. And even as an infantry officer, I can see the importance of this when I think about the Black Sea. There are so many ships that are moving around that are taking stolen Ukrainian grain. They're moving weapons around. They're moving gas or diesel, and it's hard to track them and keep accountability of all that. So getting that right in the Baltic region and in the North Atlantic would seem important for all of us. General Keevanen, sir.
Yeah, I just shortly comment because Admiral Hager, Jonas, my friend, will elaborate it, but I would argue that in the Baltic Sea there are many international arrangements to have a true recognized maritime picture, except the seabed, what is happening there, as Fleming pointed out. And then what comes then, a bilateral arrangement, we share our recognized maritime picture between our MOX Maritime Operations Center. So I would argue that in the Baltic Sea, in broad terms, it's there.
No, I can only add to that, but I would say in the cooperation between the Nordic nations now, there really isn't any more excuses, because we're now, hopefully, will be all allies. So then all the prerequisites are there to be able to share information and to create the situational awareness that we need. And as General Keevanen was saying, we have already established cooperation on the sea surveillance of the surface traffic in the Baltic Sea. I would say it's relatively good. Seabed warfare and undersea and underwater surveillance is a completely different ballgame, and I think that you have to have a really hard think on what type of sensors you need, and how you then share that information together. But it's doable. But there's a reason for why submarines are invisible when they're underwater. So I think that technology is still maybe not as mature as some of us hope. So it will take time, but it's still a lot of potential there.
Okay, so I've got one more specific question I would want to ask each of you, and then we'll do a lightning round where you'll have 1 minute to say the final thing that you didn't get to say because I asked stupid questions or didn't ask the right question, okay? But my question, and this is going to seem, this is an easy one for this particular group, but I get asked all the time, and I think it's very unfair since I'm from Florida, I get asked all the time, what is the impact of the coming winter on Ukraine, on the Russian war in Ukraine? Who's going to suffer the most? What impact will it have? Other than some obvious things. So I'm going to ask this group who has so much experience in extreme cold weather to include at sea, how would you answer that question? Who will have advantage? Or what are the impacts of a winter in Ukraine? General Christensen, why don't you go first? And we'll go that way and then come this way.
Okay, no, I think we will see a more static war during the winter, basically fighting from trenches, as we already see, unless Ukraine gets even more support. We need to speed up the support to Ukraine, and I think that Russia will benefit from a more static war. So unless we speed up support to Ukraine, time is on Russia's side.
Yeah, well, I'm in line with Derek. Russia, they changed their strategy, I would say, in the war overall, but now they're in a defensive posture there, even though there is some heavy fighting in Donetsk and Luhansk. And then, but the actual question, what the weather impact will be over the winter time, I haven't checked the weather forecast because it depends on temperatures, of course. But overall, whatever the weather is, I would say that it will be more static over the coming months due to several reasons. What we have seen since the end of August when Ukraine launched their counteroffensives.
There's really not more to add. I think our support to Ukraine with the winter capability they need will be crucial, and to keep that sustained over the winter, I think is also will be crucial for the Ukrainians and for us to be continue to support. think will also be the outcome of this winter. But when it's cold, both sides will freeze. So that's it's really of what type of gear you have.
Well, I think that when it comes to the ability to build combat power during the wintertime to be ready for a spring offensive on either part of the stalemate we are seeing right now, I really think that the Ukrainians they have the best chance right now. But I also agree what Eric said. In the long run, it might be the Russians who have the advantage. But I think when it comes to building combat power right now, because NATO is a relatively slow machinery, but when it comes into gear, then it can really support Ukraine, and that is what we are seeing right now, at least in my opinion. So I think that the Ukrainians have a pretty good chance to build combat power in the wintertime, to be able to do what they would like to do when it becomes springtime and maneuver warfare is possible again.
I will focus, of course, on the maritime aspect of your question. I'm not a specialist of what could happen ashore, but probably a slowing down conflict and always Russian very embarrassed and in bad situation. So what we could fear, or not fear, but what we have to be prepared to counter is a possible overflow again of Russian forces in the north of Atlantic, especially by Russian submarines, nuclear submarines, in order to hamper our cohesion, to test our disposal and our strengths. So it's very important for us to be prepared to continue to work hard and to show our strengths in the north of Atlantic all together, ships and all the means, the devices we deployed in the north.
So as the only Floridian on the platform here, I want to push back on this a little bit. It seems to me that in terms of how both sides will perform over the next, let's say, 3 months, it goes to very basic things. Who has the best equipment? Proper winter clothing, boots, those kinds of things, as well as a place where they can get out of that trench for a few hours or a few days for some warm shelter, something warm to rations to be able to sustain that. Even I know that it takes sergeants to force soldiers to drink water in the cold, to remind them to change socks, to do basic kinds of things to help them stay in the fight. And as I look at the two sides and the fact that Canada, UK, Germany, and I think Norway and other countries are providing winter equipment to Ukrainians, whereas Russians are importing winter uniforms from North Korea, my sense is that Ukrainian side is going to be much better prepared to deal with the conditions. My sense that the small unit leadership at the soldier level is far superior on the Ukrainian side, that they will do those kind of things. And yes, I know the mythology of the Russian, they're able to withstand everything, and they can just, get beat, and they can keep on going. In this case, they're not defending Leningrad, they're not defending Stalingrad, they're occupying Ukraine. The Ukrainian soldiers are defending Ukraine. And so I think the moral, psychological aspect of this, and especially with tens of thousands of newly mobilized soldiers that absolutely do not want to be there, I think the potential, not for a big winter offensive, but for Russian forces to suffer extensively, and Ukrainians are very methodically going after the Russian logistics system, and they're just going to keep pounding it. Almost everything in that southern part north of Crimea is already within HIMARS range. So I think I would say advantage to Ukraine, but you're exactly right that if this thing just drags on and on and on, then it goes advantage to Russia.
Yeah, so that was my point. So if we support Ukraine, they have a purpose. They know what they're fighting for. The Russians could easily collapse because they don't understand, the soldiers, they don't really understand what they are doing there. So I think that's the sort of the black swan that could change everything rapidly. But then Ukraine needs support, and that's my point. The last point is that we should not be distracted by incidents in Europe, trying to basically disrupt our way of thinking and living, and disrupt our support to Ukraine, because that's something I could see happening with critical infrastructure. So we need to support Ukraine, and I spoke with Valery on Friday, the Ukrainian Chief of Defense. He knows what he needs, and we have it. So continue to support. Then they can make a big difference there. Thank you.
Okay, so here we are in the lightning round before General Fulmer invites everybody to the bar. I will say this: I live in Frankfurt in the West End, and I have been impressed with how Germany has reacted to the challenge. I think the Kremlin played the gas card too early, and the German government had time to start building up gas storage. I think it's 100% right now. And the attitude of people that live in West End of Frankfurt that I talk to has changed from worrying about Omar and worrying about gas prices to now they correct people whose heating is too warm in the house or at a business. They say, how come you're not down to 17 or 18 or something like that? And they tell you to go buy a new Mutze if you're complaining about the cold. So I'm confident, especially after hearing our two leaders tonight. So here's how we'll do this. Admiral, we'll start with you, and everybody has 1 minute to say the one thing that you didn't get to say, but you want to make sure that the audience hears tonight.
Thank you. I would just like to say that we will continue to grow our military and total defense capability as we go into the NATO as members and become and continue to be a net provider. I think that's an important message. We are on the cusp and moving towards the 2% target, hopefully in 2026. But I think that's kind of the message that is very important for us, and we're very eager to become members as well, as we will all feel that we can see there's so much potential there. Thank you.
NATO membership of Sweden and Finland will change the military strategic setup up in the north and the situation. And there is a need and opportunity at the same time for NATO to reassess their military posture there. This includes, of course, the further deepening defense cooperation between our nations.
So I think we all, as Chief of Defences, are facing the same challenges now, because we're all investing more. So the challenge I'm facing was expressed by also, not me, I didn't find out these words, but another Chief of Defence said it. So when do we move from what we call industrialized age platforms, which we know are working, into new modern technology that we still say is not mature enough? So when do we take that transition? And for me in Norway now, I think the time is right to start rethinking that, because, as I said, the Russian conventional land forces are very weak at the moment in our neighborhood. So we have an opportunity to do that. But we have to think through that together within NATO.
Well, a couple of points. I think that at the Madrid summit, we took a lot of decisions. Now we have to, on the military side, deliver upon those political decisions. I have 1,200 soldiers deployed to Estonia and Latvia for the time being. I'm looking for partners to come into a rotation, because I can't stand that number and sustain it on the long run. The other point I would make, we need, of course, to support Ukraine in the long haul. We are also doing that from the Danish side. And the third point I want to make is the world is bigger than the problems we are facing right now, because there are other dangers out there. And I think Europe is not immune to those other dangers. For instance, the strategic concept pinpoints also China as a potential thing that we need to be aware of, and the US is even more clear on that matter. So the world is bigger than only Europe. We have a lot of problems right now, but we also do need to have the ability to think on the other issues as well. Thanks.
And for me, 2 points. The first one is the fact we'll continue to strengthen the cohesion, the coordination within NATO for the operation at sea, especially, of course, in the north of Atlantic and in the Baltic Sea. And to be sure that Russians' naval activities will never disturb, will never hamper the strength and the willingness of European and NATO, and to be sure that we will focus only on the support of Ukraine. Second point is not in my area of responsibility because I'm in charge of Atlantic and not of Med Sea and Black Sea. But I think the challenge now for the maritime aspect in NATO is also the coming back of allies in Black Sea, step by step. How to go back in that region. So we have to think about that.
Thanks, sir. Okay, so each of you would have compiled your own takeaways from this conversation. I'm just going to name 5 that I'm taking away, and then we'll wrap up. First, my new favorite word or phrase is seabed warfare. I think I had probably imagined something like that was going on, but I didn't think of the 9,000 kilometers of pipeline or tens of thousands of kilometers of cable, that you either have to protect it by detection or by deterrence, and it has to be robust enough to absorb loss, temporary, whether it's destruction or cuts. The second one is clearly a need for a recognized maritime common operating picture. Third, I agree, it will be just about seamless for Finland and Sweden to, once the official political decision is made and ratified, that our 2 newest allies, nobody will even, it won't be like a bump in the road. It'll just get better. We'll just accelerate as your quality women and men start to fill NATO headquarters and formations, and you join the various NATO missions. The fourth one is, and Eric, you made me think of it, is how quickly can we fix our defense investments? And Secretary General Stoltenberg, I remember a couple of years ago during discussions about 2% and all that, and he said, hey, look, when I was Prime Minister, we were not 2% either. But that's understandable that nations don't invest when you don't see the threat. But when you see the threat, it's unacceptable not to invest. And I think he's right. It's, okay, we're not where we want to be. Let's get moving there. And I don't think anybody today is unclear about the threat. And so the moral responsibility of our civilian leaders to make sure that the women and men of your armed forces have the best possible chance to accomplish the mission and also to survive. That's a significant moral responsibility for our civilian leaders. And then the last point is, I am so impressed with these men here on my left and right. Huge responsibilities that each of you have. You never have perfect information, yet you're expected to be successful all the time without adequate resources, and somehow you keep doing it. And I think the chief occupant of the Kremlin never anticipated this scene right here. And this is how we're going to continue protecting the hundreds of millions of people that live inside NATO. So please, a round of applause for these experts here.
Yes, and Lieutenant General Hodges, thank you for doing the chair for this very prominent group. Admirals Generals, I would like to extend my sincere thanks for that tour d'horizon with lots of direction for action, I think. So thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, the Behörden Spiegel has a long-lasting partnership with the French Association Civisme, Défense, Armée, Nation, CIDAN, and with the Interparliamentary European Security and Defense Association, ESTA. The CIDAN Award has been presented for the first time at the BSC 2012, and ESTA has been a partner nearly from the beginning of the BSC. The ceremony will be attended by the winners of the CIDAN and the CIDAN-ESTA committee as well.